Hello everybody, it's Grandmama. Time for another story from a Hometown Scrapbook by Ben Weatherwax. Today's story, Otter Hunting. Hello there. We told you one evening last week of Charlie McIntyre, the patriarch of Capellas, and how he came from Ireland to settle at the beaches and become one of Grays Harbor's most beloved and distinguished pioneers. And incidentally, we mentioned that Charlie was one of the deans of the otter hunters during the last years, and was in fact one of the last surviving members of that fraternity that was known the world over for marksmanship and ballistic ability. And after we have told you the story of Charlie McIntyre and gotten in a few incidental words about otter hunting, we had a request to tell you the story of otter hunters, how it all came about, when it was started, and in fact to fill in the warp and wools of the tale with some of the essential facts. So we've opened our scrapbook tonight to the story of these intrepid huntsmen who were scouring the North Pacific seas for the valuable otter pelts long before white men settled in our parts of the country, and in fact when very little of the western United States was known to the white men, other than the Spanish of the Southern California. For otter hunting, as such, is older than written history in this part of America. So extensive was it, and so thoroughly did the men who hunted this valuable animal pursue their hunt, that for many years it was thought that the otters had been hunted to extinction. But in 1931, a single otter was killed by a Native American on the coast of Vancouver Island. It was the first recorded killing of an otter in modern times, and much publicity attended it. Many people thought that a single otter might have been the last of its kind, and since there were no more otters to disprove it, the Canadian government ordered the animal confiscated and its pelt mounted to show the sleek sea animal that once abounded along the coast, and that was the saltwater counterpart of the buffalo. In our story, early development, and whether or not it was the last otter, at least it indicates how near the animal is to extinction. Yes, like the buffalo, the sea otter had its day in the struggle for empire. Its pelt drew traders. The traders remained to explore, and the explorations drew all the nations into conflict. Russia, England, Spain, and the United States all laid claims to the hunting grounds of that valuable animal. Long before, they were concerned with the vast land-borne weather of what is now the state of Washington and British Columbia. Also, those rich pelts built fortunes, and the fortunes reached out for trade, not alone in sea otter skins, but in other lines, and such expeditions as that sent west by John Jacob Astor has had one aim: a firm control of the otter trade. The Hudson Bay Company had otter in mind when it pushed into the Northwest, and the first settlements on Vancouver Island were built on the profits from otter hunting. This unknown region in the North Pacific got its first recognition for its wealth and trade possibilities from the sea otter. And part of the cargo of furs with which Robert Gray returned to Boston from his voyage in the Northwest to discover the Columbia and our own harbor, part of that stock of fur was pelts of sea otters taken off of our coast. Yes, history has a lot to say about sea otters. So closely is that animal entwined with the history of the development of our own Northwest. Captain James Cook, a wandering Englishman who charted much of the Pacific Ocean, is credited with starting the otter trade, thought largely by accident. When he touched at Vancouver Island in 1778, he picked up a few otter pelts from the villagers along the coast and later sold them for a handsome profit in China. It was a small start, of course, But the size of the profit, the reported number of the otter, and the ease at which they were obtained led to far-reaching results. The news spread rapidly that there were fine furs and plenty of them in the waters off the coast of the Pacific Northwest. The profits were large and obtaining easy. As Captain Hook was on his third and final voyage, when he trafficked in other pelts, he had small opportunity to develop the trade, but others who followed in the wake of the explorer's ship found it easy to develop what he had discovered. They boosted the trade to almost inconscionable proportions and started the animal on its long road down to extinction, or near extinction. There were probably otter hunters close behind Captain Cook, but we have no record of them. It was about 1785 when the first ship arrived off the northwest coast with the sole purpose of trading in otter skins. It was a brig of 60 tons under Captain James Hanna. It had been dispatched from China under a license from the East India Company. The captain landed at Nootka on Vancouver Island in August. The Indians, which along the coast in those times were fierce and warlike, attacked the ship's company, but were beaten off despite the fact that it numbered only 20 men. And the captain obtained 560 sea otter pelts, which history records he sold in China for $20,600. It turned in a very handsome profit for the little brig and made Captain Hanna the world authority on how to obtain and what to do with sea otter skins. The skipper came back the next year with a ship built for trade and named it in honor of his intended victims. It was the Sea Otter of 120 tons, but this year he was not so fortunate in his trading and left with only a meager 100 pelts. However, he had competition. 3 other fur company expeditions reached the Northwest that year, and the big business of getting here first and getting away with the most was on. 2 of the 3 expeditions came here under men who had sailed with Captain Cook. They were Nathaniel Portlock with a ship King George and George Dixon with a vessel the Queen Charlotte. The 2 vessels left the coast that year with a combined haul of 2,552 otter skins and sold the lot in China for a total of $54,875, or an equal value in Oriental merchandise. It was a common practice at that time to do trade the pelts for tea, sandalwood, and all other valuable commodities for resale in the home port of England. These expeditions started things, and the whole world knew the wealth in furs lay off the Pacific coast of the North American continent. Now, as the trade grew, the traders worked further along the coast for now. Many came where the few had worked the territory before, and as the traders expanded their grounds, they made the necessary new geographical notes, extending the knowledge of the Northwest country. If there was a climate reached in the otter trade, we have no record of it, other than the fact that it was probably in the early part of the 19th century, probably around the time that Lewis and Clark were making their overland trek to the end at the coast just south of Grays Harbor, and that provided New America with a key to its western wealth. The herds were thinning now, and the pelts becoming rare, and the trade in skin was on the diminish. But the Northwest was becoming settled as years passed. With the coming of the white men came firearms and precision hunting, and the survivors of the mass hunts, the sea otters that had escaped hunting with spears from open boats, were now tracked down individually by keen-eyed men with straight-shooting rifles. It was past the midpoint of the 19th century when Grays Harbor beaches became the scene of the hunting. It was Charlie McIntyre, of whom we told you last week, who was among the most prominent. He started hunting in 1876 and saw the decline and end of the 100-year hunt for the valuable pelts. The white man now developed tactics peculiar to his weapon, and he constructed a towering platform overlooking the surf and often built out in the surf line. Prone on the platform, his eyes glinting down the barrel of his Sparks rifle, his muscles tense, his hands steady. The sea otter hunt would wait. When the distant, dark speck centered on his sights, his gun roared with a heavy recoil, and a cloud of stinging powder smoked enveloped at the marksman at his platform. He studied the distant speck as he absent-mindedly blew the smoke from the barrel and fed another cartridge into the chamber. They seldom missed, those old marksmen, and they are recalled as among the most deadly shots in the West ever known. Their trade called for precision in shooting, exacting patience, and a rugged constitution. As he waited for his shot, the hunter hoped against hope that the speck would work its way inshore. The best shooting he could hope for would be a range of 400 to 600 yards. Many otters were killed at a range of 700 yards, and Charlie McIntyre is credited with killing at 100 yards, one of the longest shots ever made on a hunting ground that extended from Cape Flattery to the mouth of the Columbia. His marksmanship can be appreciated when you know that it was only the head of the animal that produced a target. The long, slim body remained submerged as the beast swam. When the Native Americans hunted, they used war canoes and spears, and as they had for a century. But eventually, they took up the rifle too and shot the animals without the skill and ability of such trained shooting as McIntyre and his cohorts. As the 19th century faded out, otter hunting was almost gone, and good marksmen, and the only very best now, viewed the animals. A good marksman was lucky to get half a dozen in a season, but their price had gone correspondingly high, and the 6-foot furs now brought as much as $500 a pelt. Sharps rifles, and it appeared that the hunting of the sea otter had ended with the end of the sea otters. None were shot. In fact, none were reported. The government outlawed the killing of the animal, but unlike the buffalo, which received protection when a few remained, it appeared that the authorities had withheld too long, that they were now protected when none remained to protect. In 1903, Charlie McIntyre hung up his Sharps rifle, and the towers that had marked the beaches like giant great sentinels in the mist began to fall down because of their own weight and under the lash of the winter storms. The otter hunters became men of legends, and finally, with the death of McIntyre about 12 years ago, like the otter they had hunted, they were extinct. And then, in 1931, a Vancouver Island Native American killed an otter, and was told, as we told you before, and the history mourned that the last of the sea otters had died at the hand of a man. But not so. During the years of the late war, survey parties working on the far reaches of the Aleutian Islands discovered a colony of the animals. First, just a single colony of several hundred, then other colonies, until they had counted more than 8,000 of the valuable animals. The otters had survived, and in fact were coming back. During the early years of the war, a woman combing the Pacific near Monterey Peninsula in California reported to game authorities the presence of a strange animal on the rocks off the coast. They investigated and found a colony of 100 sea otters. True, they have not come back as they once were. The seas off the northwest coast are not black with the animals in their animal migrations, their sleek fur shining in the sunlight as they slip onto the beach or come onto the rocks. But they may reach their preponderance again, and the people who live on our coast 2 or 3 generations from now may know the sea otters in the numbers that swam the coast in the days of Captain Cook. So, we look both behind and ahead tonight when we read the story of the sea otter in our hometown scrapbook. Thank you for listening.